Brendan, FIFA rankings, how would you describe them? They're not exactly made up, dear listeners, but they do seem to be pulled out of a very corrupt organisation's collective anus.
Not singular anus, collective anus.
What's the plural?
Sarlacc.
What is the plural?
Sarlacc of FIFA, if you will.
What is the plural? Is it anus-I? How do we do this?
I would go ani. I don't know. Maybe we have to ask Javier Mascherano about all the times he tore his anuses. Yeah, I mean, it's a meaningless statistic, and nowadays they have an algorithm, but once we got it to fourth in the world, I think is where, one of those anuses looked at the other and said, we should probably fix this, right?
I was sent a term that comes close to capturing what we're up to here, Brendan, which is, it's a Welsh term. Prepare yourself. It's hiraeth, which means longing for a place or a feeling to which you can no longer return. I think we both, and this is why I love you, feel hiraeth for those pre-2018 days when the thought of the United States not making a World Cup seemed impossible.
Oh man, but let's not jump too far ahead. I mean, the emotional carnage of 2018. But yeah, 90 I didn't know about. 94 they gave it to us, fine. 98 was aware of it, but 2002 everything clicked, and at that point your circadian rhythm clicks in. This is 100% true. At that point, and ever since, my life began to be measured in 4-year cycles. Like it was entirely okay. That World Cup has ended, and now I'm gonna we wait for this tournament and that tournament, and then qualifying to begin, and then we become a butterfly, and then we start all over again.
I love that. That your life so quickly adjusted. There's people who are born without wisdom teeth. There's people who are born without appendix. They are kind of like ahead of the rest of us. Human beings in the future will not have either of those things. I like to believe, Brendan Hunt, you are one of those people, but for the World Cup in the United States. And God, that's amazing, because I too, and I talk about this a lot, measure my life. If someone says, yeah, I met you in 2005, my mind goes, okay, 2005, nearest World Cup 2006. I locate myself spatially, mentally, geographically in the World Cup and then work backwards. I love that's the same for you.
Absolutely. 100%.
Like me, you will not be borrowing any Welsh terms, at least until after our first World Cup game in November. So let's dive into 2006, which you have brought us to so generously. A tournament, Brendan, which took place at a time, a little site called Twitter.com. You may have heard of it, launched in a largely vain and self-involved fashion. And perhaps most life-changingly of all, the movie blockbuster Cars came out, earned 10 million in merch over the next decade. I am Tomato for life. And remember, listeners, life is a highway. Where were you watching the 2006 World Cup, Brendan?
So as I said in previous episode, I'd moved to Amsterdam. And in 2004, I left Amsterdam for Los Angeles. But I didn't have enough work to stop me from accepting invitations back to Amsterdam for this or that odd gig. So 2006 World Cup, I was back in Amsterdam for the entire thing.
Telling people stories of John O'Brien. And just never having to buy a beer in those bars again. I was in New York. I was writing away. I was starting to cover football more and more and more. And as this cycle started, Bruce Arena was still at the helm, with his oddly pursed lips. We walked into the cycle with his khakis overconfidently hiked up after the delirium of 2002's quarter-final. Glory that should have been wind in his sails, but I don't know if you remember this. US qualifying actually began with a false start. There was a contract dispute that doesn't sound like US soccer at all, Brendan, battling its own players, but the players actually at the beginning of the cycle went on strike. They'd not had a deal in a long, long time. And the US soccer actually pulled up USL and major indoor soccer league players, I guess, /scabs, into a training camp and prepared to play Trinidad and Tobago. Indoor players representing the national team. God, when I hear that, part of me is like, oh my God, Bruce Arena, if you just called me, I would have grabbed my pair of Sambas. All you needed to do was ask. You and I probably have never come closer to the American national team than in that moment.
I mean, who knows if one or two of those fellas would have been something special. I mean, Sean Payton played for the Bears during the strike of '87 or whatever it was.
Who was the Rams quarterback? What was his name?
Kurt Warner.
We were denied the Kurt Warner of US soccer.
And just to be clear, I'm in no way pining for that to have happened. That would have been an absolute disaster, and I'm sure it was just a real on the brink bit of gamesmanship. But good Lord, what a disaster!
The regular players agreed to no strike, no lockout provision in return for a 38% raise and retroactive pay. God bless player power. And the regulars were back on the field as the USA beat Trinidad and Tobago at Queen's Park Oval in Port of Spain 2-1. And by the time we headed to Azteca to play Mexico, it was all thoughts on the football. And I need to know, Brendan, what do you think of when I say those words, Azteca, the vaunted fortress of a stadium, really a mythical venue that honestly could have been a figment of George R.R. Martin's imagination. When you think of Azteca, the dread word Azteca, what comes to mind?
When I'm starting to think of life in those 4-year cycles, the Azteca game is in that 4 years. The Azteca game is almost more important than the U.S. leg of that, because much like I want to be there, at least, in my living room or at the pub when we win the World Cup, I wanted so desperately to be there when we beat Mexico in Azteca, especially in a proper qualifier. Yeah, 2005 was not that year.
Yes, I mean, you could insert any year for not that year in World Cup side. We have never, I mean, that's a word that comes to my mind, impregnability. This stadium is a steep bank stronghold, perched 7,200 feet above sea level, 100 tons of concrete laid out on top of volcanic rock. I always find the volcanic rock detail particularly like just a narrative of flourish. And we have never won there in World Cup qualifying. It's so bloody hard to play there, dear listeners, as the altitude, the fans, the madhouse, the smog, those pesky flying bags of piss. And this team prepared for the Azteca game at a former fox farm high in the mountains outside Colorado Springs. Get me a fox farm, said Bruce Arena. All the newspaper reports are like, Mastroianni found bear prints. The team had a snowball fight. None of this worked. The players were huffing and puffing, getting oxygen at halftime in the Azteca, and they eventually lost 2-1. They bounced back the next game. Landon Donovan declared before kickoff after the Azteca disaster, I want to crush Guatemala! Like MJ, he took it personally, and the game 2-0, and the US proceeded to go on a tear from there. We did what we needed to do. We won every home game. That's what you do in CONCACAF. We did it without conceding during another legendary Dos a Cero against Mexico, which clinched qualification with 3 games to go. A game remembered mostly for the great stare-down match, 9 minutes in, between Jared Borghetti, who made the somewhat irrational decision, Brendan, to pick a fight with Man Mountain, Gucci Onyewo, 6'4". Gooch just looks at him with pure disdain. I mean, if you were going to pick a fight with an American player, would you single out Gooch, 209 pounds, etch pecs and abs? I mean, he could bench press you and me simultaneously.
You don't step to the Gooch. Nobody steps to the Gooch. What are you thinking? I mean, it clearly was a situation, because Borghetti, pretty big guy, but clearly it was a situation where, like, they had decided, in the locker room, like, we have to intimidate them. We cannot be afraid. First time you get an opportunity, you get in their face. And so, like, with that instinct in mind, Borghetti was like, yes, this is my chance. They was like, oh, it's you. It's you.
I mean, by the way,
chosen poorly.
Yes, memes had not been invented yet, but if they had, this moment would be possibly still top 3 US men's national team gif of all time. Gooch, by the way, was in Belgium. I think he later signed for AC Milan, a spell which was best remembered for getting into a fist fight with Zlatan Ibrahimovic during training. It was like watching Godzilla versus an American Mothra. It needed, this is an amazing statistic, 10 teammates to separate them. Ibra's autobiography has a long telling of the fight, which goes like this. I headbutted him. and we flew at each other. We wanted to tear each other limb from limb. It was brutal. We were rolling around, punching, kneeing each other. We were crazy and furious. It was life and death. And I read that and I was like, oh my God, is that not almost identical to the first time you met Sudeikis?
Yeah, real claiming of territory. I think Jason just peed on me. In fact, was how that went. And then
Jellyfish,
it was on.
Jellyfish, I'm there for you, bro. I'm there for you. Just, oh my God, that fight with Borghetti, just two alphas going at each other with no real impact, just sent US swagger level to 11 ahead of this tournament. US Soccer used the image in promotional materials on Gucci's bio for like ever. It was on every message board. Look at what they are, dear listeners, message boards. They're hilarious. But this moment encapsulated the sense of American bravado heading into this World Cup. Dos a cero again. Bruce, when we qualified, beautiful moment. Look at it on YouTube. Chastely kissed his wife with cameras there and just said, this is amazing, just said to her, see you later.
See you later.
Which I just love. I'm going off for months. See you later. I don't know what it meant. I've read a lot into it, but there were US flags all over the field. Butt slaps. Landon Donovan ends up topless in an Uncle Sam hat. Screaming at the cameras, they suck, meaning Mexico. I'm so happy, man. What a great American quote. It was some qualification, in all honesty. US went back on course, finished top of the hex. To your point, we were always a little brother, is what you've said in the last episode. This was the first time we clipped Mexico in the hex on head-to-head record, albeit, but the first time in 71 years. And it felt magnificent, Brendan.
This was the first time I was living in the States, for a portion of the qualification process. Like it's a thing that Americans don't really fully get if they're just that, one layer removed from football. They like to know there's a World Cup, but like you're just in it or you're not. But like no, it's years. It's years of anguish and work. I remember watching that the Mexico game. And shout out to Steve Ralston with his footnote in U.S. soccer history. Good for Steve. At Second City in Chicago, I think I was seeing a show that night maybe. And I went across the street to Corcoran's. And it's like, do you have a TV where maybe I could watch the U.S. soccer game? Soccer game? Yeah, I know, it's crazy, right? But it's on ESPN too. Like, all right, we can turn it on the back for you. Great. I go in the back.
The back, and so dismissive. Yes, we can turn on the back.
Capacity, 30, 40 people in that back room, and I was literally the only person there for the entirety of the game. And while I kind of like cherish that memory in a way, like it won't happen anymore. No longer. From now on, people know about the qualifiers, and they especially know when we're playing Mexico. Not that we're going to have one for several years, but yeah, that was a time where I started to appreciate the journey as much as the destination wherein begins a new journey.
So many listeners will be nodding. Many of us have been in that metaphoric back room. We weren't alongside you, but we were alongside you, Brendan. And so to the World Cup in Germany, 8 teams had qualified for the first time, including Serbia and Montenegro, 2 teams which had officially separated into 2 countries a week prior, but FIFA made them play as one, because that's how they roll. And the US squad, lots of experience. Captain America 2.0, Claudio Reyna, 4th World Cup for him. Eddie Pope, Brian McBride, 3 straight World Cups each. Casey Keller, age 36, finally got the start this time. 4th World Cup, I think it was. What a keeper, what a leader, what a career. Played over 2 decades, won over 100 international caps. I think his career spanned 4 presidents. I love this. I mean, it's astonishing. 4 presidents from George Washington to it was H.W. It was H.W. Bush to Obama. I mean, another gent, Brendan, who deserves more due. That guy was a proper warrior.
Oh my gosh, what a machine! Spoiler alerts, but this 2006 World Cup would become the first World Cup I ever attended. And I heard the chants of Casey Keller in that one melody we seem to have for any of our chants. Okay, clam, 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 clam. I mean, it worked. Because really, for us, it's not about originality. It's about unanimity. So just a simple melody that everyone knows. But, we'll get to that.
When I think of Keller, so many things come to mind. Khaki pants, spectacles, male pattern baldness, functional but ugly
Dennis
sweaters.
Bergkamp comes to mind as well.
Why'd you have to do me in the down below's fatherhood? Let's go back
You
to
open the
positive.
door.
I don't know. I also love that this was a guy who seemed to savor every step of his journey. There was a great piece, I think it was in the New York Times, that talked about how when he played in Germany, he lived in a 1,000-year-old castle complete with towers, moat and gargoyles. It was the gargoyles that got me. And he just had to swap time constantly with Friedel throughout his career, which was cruel on them both. Bruce Arena told the press that selecting between them was like, quote, splitting hairs. A bull joke from the Bruce. That was dark. This was back in the day when the US just pumped out elite goalkeepers. Your Friedels, your Kellers, and your Tim Howards, and of course, the Crown Prince, Bradley Guzan. Do you remember back then how much we ate? We ate, Brendan, to be able to produce one single gent who could hold his own in the outfield.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, we had Landon and Claudio really was about it in terms of people who felt like they could walk into any team. And yeah, just the desperation. But the one thing we knew that we would forever not only have a goalkeeper, but if that goalkeeper somehow, got a cleat to the nuts and could not go on, we're not going to miss a beat. We're not going to miss a beat. Throw us your worst. We'll go to the third guy if you need us to. Bring it.
By the way, I love how specific you are with that. By the way, you can hurt us anywhere, but if it's in the nuts, we can replace them. The team's slogan was, United we play, United we win. US soccer, an incredible tradition of always letting the interns do their slogans. And excitement in US football, fan bubble, was really off the charts before this World Cup. The USA was up to fourth, Brendan. Fourth in the FIFA World Rankings just months before the World Cup. And we need to add a asterisk. Brendan, FIFA rankings, how would you describe them? They're not exactly made up, dear listeners, but they do seem to be pulled out of a very corrupt organisation's collective anus.
Not singular anus, collective anus.
What's the plural?
Sarlacc.
What is the
plural?
Sarlacc
of FIFA, if you will.
What is the plural? Is it anus-I? How do we do this?
I would go ani. I would go ani. I don't know. Maybe we have to ask Javier Mascherano about all the times he tore his anuses. Yeah, I mean, it's a meaningless statistic, and nowadays they have an algorithm. But once we got it to fourth in the world, I think is where, one of those anuses looked at the other and said, we should probably fix this, right?
Were we?
Fourth place. I'm not sure this math is right.
Were we? Because I mean, I wanted to ask you, ahead of this World Cup, do you remember your vibe? We were fourth in the weeks before the World Cup. Did you not have a little sense of like, oh my God, this is the one. We could, we might, we should possibly win it all. Were you not high on our own supply? Because I was.
Yeah, but I wasn't fourth place high on us. Like that was clearly a mistake. Like I remember having a conversation even with someone about this, at the bar in Amsterdam. Like this is bad math, right? They gotta sort this out because there's just no way. Top 10, maybe, and even that would have been a lofty perch, but fourth place was asking for trouble.
Bruce Arena was certainly feeling feisty. This was the first and last time a modern US coach would go 2 World Cups in a row, and it's so mentally and physically tough to go 2 cycles, as we would discover. ESPN were airing games in 3D. That's how all in they were. Every game aired live. And I don't know if you remember, Brenda, the commentators for this one, Dave O'Brien and Marcelo Balboa, great player from the 94 squad, great mullet, great defender, great everything. And they called all the US games and the final. O'Brien was a baseball guy who had called precisely 8 soccer games before he was given this World Cup mission. And even before the tournament had started, there was an online petition asking for him to be replaced. The English teacher from Fort Wayne, Indiana, who started it, physically mailed the petition to ESPN after quickly collecting 5,000 signatures. And I don't think O'Brien helped his cause amongst the soccer cognoscenti by saying publicly, there's kind of a petulant little clique of soccer fans. There's not many of them, but they're mean-spirited. And they're not really the audience we want to reach anyway. Do you remember these guys?
No, because I was in... I remember them generally, yes. I do not remember them in that tournament because I was back in Amsterdam, so I never
So
had to listen.
you had a lot of... You didn't...
Had a lot of... and very little baseball with it. But yeah, hey, Dave O'Brien, no one told you in advance that there's a petulance quotient among the soccer heads?
That's all we got. Don't take away our petulance, O'Brien.
Yeah,
but
come for the petulance, stay for the gatekeeping. Dave, this isn't going to go well for you.
I do want you to know, these two, to me, like when I look back at my own origin source story, and this podcast is not about me in any way, shape or form, but I did actually listen to their commentary and write an article for the New Republic in which I wish I could find this, it's not online anymore, but I asked readers to call into ESPN's customer service line, which I gave in the article, and asked for O'Brien to be replaced. I think in one of the first games I watched him commentate, he said, and here's the world's most famous player taking the field, Charlie Beckham. And it was honestly the single moment where I realised I needed to do football full time in the United States, to just dedicate my life to trying to band-aid over this. So I'm very grateful. If you are listening, Dave O'Brien, thank you. Thank you. You've changed my life in every way. As did, talking about changing lives that are not me, because no one wants to hear that. So much hype.
I liked it.
So much hype came from Clint Dempsey's rap video, Don't Tread.
Game took hold like the roots of a tree. Think soccer ain't a sport, then why not you sign me? Cause I got on my job and made the game ferocious. I was born with the drive, I got that from no coaches. Big Hulk and Deuce, spitting truth in the booth. Stop, drop, and roll, I brings down the roof.
Dempsey didn't just score goals, he delivered bangers off the field with Texan rappers, the late great Big Hawk and XO. Oh, Brendan, how would you describe Clint Dempsey? Just this singular... one-of-a-kind footballer, never mind one-of-a-kind American, but there's someone who never saw him play, really an American original.
How can someone be simultaneously hard scrabble and languid? Like, he so fit the profile of, blue-collar, gritty, outwork you kind of player, but he was smooth, he was very, very graceful. And as Bruce Arena famously said, he would try shit, and because he could do shit. He could score from damn near anywhere, and was a constant threat. Not the fastest guy, but he just got into spaces, but not with the brute force of McBride. He just slinked on over to where the ball was going to be.
The best players make the ball look as if it's coming to them. They really, really do. And Clint was one of those players. His story, almost like a great fable. Grew up playing on dirt fields in the Latino men's leagues of Nacogdoches, Texas. His family struggling financially. They actually bet on his sister Jennifer's promising tennis career. Clint had to withdraw from the expensive trips to Dallas every weekend to train in a youth academy. This is an awful part of the story. Jennifer suffered a brain aneurysm tragically, and Clint returned to his travel team, travelled hours a week just to train, develop himself, was completely off the radar at every single level. But it was really his desire, his chip on his shoulder, the metaphorical American chip that fueled him. This is a gentleman that oozes tenacity, seems often fueled by fury. His eyes bulged every time he scored, pounded his chest, broke his own club captain's tooth in a fist fight, broke his jaw and played wired shut, broke Jimmy Conrad's jaw, broke John Terry's face. And he broke a glass window when he didn't start for the Europa League semi-final. That, to me, as a player, he broke the scoring record. This is one thing he broke that was positive. The scoring record for Americans in the Premier League. He played with this crazy simmering rage, Brendan, but also had these hobbies: bass fishing, video games, collecting sneakers, Yenga, Texas, Swisher House, rap, spending time with his just enormously wonderful family. I mean, he's such a beautiful bloke when you meet this man. He was really an oxymoron as a human being. I mean, guess that was captured by Fulham fans' chant to him: scores with his left, he scores with his right. That boy Clint Dempsey makes Drogba look shy. Really an oxymoron of a human being.
I love Clint Dempsey. I was so glad we had him. He really seemed, the reason you're talking about, like, he wasn't on anyone's radar the way that, like, the guys who were on the 2000 Olympic team were. He just was suddenly there. And it's quite a thing to, be an athlete dropping a rap record before you've been to a World Cup. I mean, it's not quite Super Bowl shuffle cocky, but it's up there. Like, who is this guy? What's he doing? He plays for the Revolution? Okay, all right, let's go for it.
And that kind of bold audacity, that was a leitmotif for this World Cup, because expectations so high, even though the draw was not kind. We were, and this is going to be a repeat signature for the next couple of World Cups, the group of death. Into it with the Czechs, with the Italians and the Ghanaians. God, what a dread group in every single fashion. And we began with the Czech Republic.
Well, hold on, it might seem like a problem to teams that aren't number 4 in the world, but when you're number 4 in the world, you feel like you got a pretty good shot of getting out of a group like that, I guess.
I remember not really fearing this group walking into it. That's how just deliriously giddy of the moment is now. And the problem was the Czech Republic were actually number 2. Number 2, even in new math, Trump's number 4 ahead of the tournament. But this was a gung-ho squad full of culture midfielders in Europe's top leagues. They finished second in the 2004 Euros. They had Pavel Nedved, just a glorious blonde mane. Truly, truly. I mean, this gentleman should have been... He looked like he was really training tigers in a Las Vegas act. And The Guardian described the platonic ideal of a Czech supporter as long-haired men with adolescent wispy metal fan moustaches who drink beer as if it's water alongside their stoical, well-groomed partners. And it felt, honestly, I was not afraid. Going into this one, I felt like we'd smash them. I mean, really did. I thought we would do them. And that hope, that confidence, that bold belief and big dreaming lasted a long time. It really did. It lasted at least 5 minutes.
See, I was more worried about the Czechs than I was the Italians at the time, because the Czechs had a pretty good Euro 2004, as I recall, and I think they eliminated, my second team, Holland, and so I was very worried about them, but I still thought, we'd go toe to toe with them. And yeah, as you say, we were quickly disabused of our notions.
300 seconds in. Oh, collar. Still, sometimes, people talk about how they have nightmares of like sitting an exam in university and not being able to get into the exam room, being stuck on a train, not being able to take their finals. I still have nightmares of Collar, this giant ball, and he rose over our back line. I think the Associated Press said like a redwood towering over shrubs. It was bald on bald violence as he blasted the ball with his forehead past Keller. 2 goals from man of the match Thomas Rosicky, who also hit the post. And suddenly, we looked like a newcomer again. That was the fear. Like I was what? Us? This isn't us. We were just roughed up. We were run over. I think we had 1 shot on goal, 1 total. And it was a brutal, humiliating wake-up call, Brendan.
It was horrible. 5 minutes in, a goal happens. That takes the wind out of your sails in such a huge way, not just in a big game, but in a big tournament for that to happen. And then I think it was no more than 20 minutes later before it was 2-0. For those new to this, there's an axiom in football about tournaments and group stages that the thing about a first game is no matter how favored you are, do not lose your first game. Even if you're a giant against a minnow, if you get a draw, in a way you've done the job, because to lose your first game puts you too far behind the 8 ball. And not only did we lose, we weren't even competitive. Bruce's philosophy of, first tackle, first shot, first goal, we weren't first anything that game. Just absolutely done apart. And yeah, maybe Czech Republic didn't like this whole fourth place talk.
Yeah, they didn't like the gap khakis that Bruce was bringing onto the field because he ended up blaming everybody, obviously, apart from himself. Landon showed no aggressiveness tonight, he said. We got nothing out of Beasley. He also called out Casey Keller, and after that one and that tongue lashing, morale was low. We still had everything to play for as we faced Italy for that second game. Honestly, it already felt like a must-win. I was in DC for this one. I actually remember going to watch the game at a football bar, great bar, the Lucky Bar, that I used to watch Premier League games at when I lived in the city in the late 90s. And when I watched those games, the Premier League games, were like 8-9 people there, total all English for the Premier League early morning broadcasts. And when I went back 2006 to watch Italy and the USA, there was a line an hour before kickoff that went round the block and then some. Honestly, like the Beatles had reformed. And it was actually that moment that I turned to my wife and I said, God, I need to dedicate my life to football in this nation because it is happening. And let's just say it didn't happen on the field. This, we should say, was the ultimate Italian team. Buffon in goal, national anthem duties in his hands, Cannavaro and Nesta. These are beautiful human beings. Great at football too, unfortunately. Pirlo and Totti pulling the strings. If you don't know who these names are, just picture human beings, exquisite, slick long hair, thin black headbands. They went on to win the World Cup. The Guardian called them no-nonsense masters of the clean sheet. And let's just get the goals out. Ultimately, the goals weren't important in this one. 22nd minute, Andrea Pirlo free kick. Alberto Giordano header goal. Celebrated by kneeling and playing an imaginary violin. By the way, have you ever given any thoughts to how you would celebrate your goal if you, Brendan Hunt, ever scored for the United States in a World Cup?
Imaginary tuba. The thing is about the tuba, and like as an improviser, I pride myself on my my object work, and you have to get the fingering exactly right. You have to sort of like really feel the weight of the tuba. Whereas Gilardino was just he was messing around. It was bad form. It was bad mime. He will not get out of the Sorbonne mime class.
He's not put the hours in at the Groundhogs.
He's not put in the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours. Very visible.
It was always a weakness in his game, his improv. I love, by the way, how you went tuba, funny, French or not quite as funny, which is just the brilliance of musical instruments. I think, by the way, I'm not going to pretend that I haven't put a lot of thought into how I would celebrate when I score for the United States. I think I'd like to pull out a tiny matchbox from my socks and then just set my nipples on fire. Just eternal flames that children all over the world would then copycat my celebration on the streets and in the schoolyards. I'm not a role model, Roger Bennett and Charles Barkley.
Well, once he got the first one going, we felt like we had to sit back and wait for him to finish the set.
I'm a completionist. Don't hold it against me. But 5 minutes later, Bobby Convey free kick, Christian Zaccardo twisted, turned, own goal, and my God, the US couldn't even score the goals that did count for them at this World Cup. Am I saying Bobby Convey is as good as Andrea Pirlo? I don't know if that's how it works or if that's a redundant question. By the way, this was the only goal Italy conceded until the Zinedine Zidane penalty in the ultimate final, which they won. But really, the story of the game was the red cards. There were a lot of yellows. The Uruguayan referee, Jorge Larionda, flash cards. I'd say a Deion Sanders pace. First red, Danielle De Rossi, elbow Brian McBride in the face. Brian McBride loves it in the face, right? He loves it. Loves blood streaming down his nose.
Much like Batman is not comfortable if he's not wearing the mask, Brian McBride is not himself if he's not wearing a curtain of blood
down the front of his own jersey. But we are America. Italy had one red card. We are #1 in the world, so we had to answer them with 2 reds of our own. 45th minute, Mascheroni went studs up into Pirlo's ankle. Oh, Pirlo, a.k.a. the Italian Bobby Convey. 2 minutes into the second half, Eddie Pope got a second yellow. Only the fourth game in World Cup history with 3 red cards in it. We make history even when we're not winning tournaments. And it needed 2 stellar saves by Keller down the stretch for a tie to occur and Keller to tell the cameras, "This team is alive!" in the same tones as I believe Frankenstein would have bellowed to Bob Lee about his monster creation. But why am I burying the lead in all of this, reliving the game? Because, frankly, in American football history, something far more important was going on, Brendan Hunt.
It was my first ever World Cup game.
You were there. You were there.
Like a kid in a candy shop, a giant international candy shop. I was living in Amsterdam. And I don't know if y'all know how trains work, but Amsterdam, Germany, not a long one, was able to get tickets to John O'Brien, which I appreciate very much to this day. Got to the stadium, the Fritz Walter Stadion in Kaiserslautern, a really interesting stadium. No tiers, just one raking bank of seats in four sides. And there was a military base nearby, I believe. So we had far more U.S. fans than you would have expected. I thought we would be completely outnumbered by Italian fans. I did not know, that I learned then, that the Italian fans have a reputation, at least anecdotally, of they don't travel to group stages. They sort of wait until it gets good. So what I loved about that day was that we the Americans, the humble Americans, absolutely outsang and outshouted the Italian fans. And it was such an incredible feeling of community. Because it was really, I'd only been to one U.S. game before, and that was a friendly in Germany where there was like 10 Americans there. This felt like a kind of home game. This was the first time, and I hope you all get to feel this feeling at some point, this feeling of we are here, and we are together, and we have this in common. And not to get over emotional and everything, and I'm not emotional, but a bit lofty, but that's the whole point of a national team in some way. They're in a nation so splintered as ours. A national team, especially when it's just in one sport that we're all paying attention to, not a splintered Olympics. A national team can be the beginning of being together and feeling a community, and this was an incredible feeling to experience there at the Fritz Walter. Footnote, the Italian fans did, though, sing Seven Nation Army, and that was the first time I'd heard that at a football match. Nowhere had I seen that before, and that's been with us ever since, and I give them full credit for that, so well done, Italy. You say it didn't feel, it felt anticlimactic afterwards, but I gotta say, in the stadium, 1-1 after getting pasted by the Czechs felt amazing, especially since for 43 minutes of that, we were down a man after having been up a man for like 10 minutes, it felt like. Then suddenly we were down one, but we fought, and then we had a goal disallowed. It looked like we had won. I think it was Beasley who shot past McBride, but McBride was clearly offside and clearly on replays blocking the keeper. But at that time, after 2 red cards and a goal disallowed, we were all in on referee conspiracy theories at the Fritz Walter. Oh my God, the fury in those stands. And so we get to 1-1, and I don't know if you caught this in the cameras, but Bruce, feeling real good about himself after selling out the whole team. A
rare occasion when Bruce felt really good about himself.
Just looks at the main American section and goes, sorry, people can't see what I'm doing. I'm giving an almost Fonzie-esque thumbs up and confident smile like, we got this, people. We are back. We got a point.
In that moment, knowing Bruce Arena, because he plays 4D chess, he knew he was doing that in that moment. He knew that one of the audience members in the crowd would later go on to create one of the greatest football juggernaut cultural shows in television history, and would be on a podcast and would be able to retell the story of that gesture of confidence.
Mark Burnett was there? That's amazing.
You were there, and I think it was Ramstein Air Force Base that's right there. I like to think that Weston McKinney's dad was also there with you. Just so many wheels within wheels, plots buried in there in every regard. I also like to think of you hitching a ride home, sadly, in the back of Louis van Gaal's Peugeot. But to me, and I love your optimism, it felt deflating, Brendan, it was. And I was like, God, we now have to go through the permutations. I'm not very good at permutations. It got to this last game of the group. The USA had to win. Italy had to win for the USA to advance. There was other things. Italy could draw. The USA could win by at least 4. I mean, this is where you need Dave O'Brien to do these things over cards on ESPN. Italy could lose and the USA could win by a lot. Basically, the gutsy point against Italy that you enjoyed by the sound of things. And I love what you said about what going to these games. It makes memories that you carry and friendships you carry forever. That is the joy of going to these tournaments. We still lived. We had a shot of progressing. I still really believed. And in that final game, the Czechs lost to Italy. It makes me sad to say these words. All we needed to do was beat Ghana to advance out the group of death, and thus a rivalry that makes me ache was born with Ghana, the mighty Black Stars. They are a fantastic footballing nation. They were an unknown back then. They had the youngest roster at the World Cup. I think it was their first ever appearance, and spoiler alert, listeners, they battered us. They opened the scoring 22 minutes. Just the legendary Claudio Reyna dallied on the ball, got stripped, got injured. Draman celebrated his goal by kneeling, putting his forehead to the turf. Beautiful moment, no doubt, for Ghanaian fans. I like to think of two Ghanaian equivalents of Brendan Hunt and me telling their story from their perspective and savouring this moment. But it was an agony for me. Reina, this was the agony, subbed off one of the true USA greats. Anyone who saw him play, such an intelligent, brave force of nature. I do believe, Brendan, because he wasn't a demander of the spotlight, he's never properly been given his due.
Certainly, the soccer heads know, and he's always, high on people's list, of the in the know folk. Some who just want to be, contrary and overthink it. We'll put him above Landon or Clint. Which I think might be pushing it, but just a graceful all-around player. He could do everything. He so rarely made mistakes, which is why that game was such a bummer. Played at some of the biggest clubs, like a glittering career and an exemplar for all who have followed.
Before we even really knew, he was playing at Manchester City. Before we really understood what it took to get to that level of football, an incredibly gracious and humble and wonderful human being, son Gio, obviously. Please God, will fulfill the multi-generational promise of one of the great footballing families our nation has produced. He walked off. Clint Dempsey, I think, delivered on at least the B-side of that single, did what he always did. Shooters take your shot, scored a volley with the outside of his boot from a clever Beasley cross, immediately started cutting up the turf with a jig. God bless Juice, living out, as you said earlier. I love you. Bruce Arena's famous quote. I love that. This is tombstone material. He tries shit. He tries shit. Incredible. Ghana responded almost immediately. Penalty. Gooch giving it away, tangling with Razok, a tiny 5'8" player. Goal 2-1. We hit the post with a McBride header. We always love some agony, but we didn't create much else. We think we finished with 4 shots on goal in the group stages. But no, 4 shots on goal, not just in this game, but the entire bloody group stages. Lowest of any team. And in the aftermath, the final whistle, didn't it all feel so crappy?
It sure did. After the highs of 2002, to have seemed to have returned to 1998 levels. I don't know if we were team number 32 out of 32 again, but we were down there.
We're back,
I was
baby.
At that game too. You thought you could keep us away. I was at that game as well, and I remember one specific moment from late in the second half as we're chasing an equalizer, which an equalizer would have been futile anyway, but we sure wanted it. And I mention this because it will come up later in our story in 2010. But if you're if you're facing the Ghana goalkeeper, I was sort of like, diagonal to your left there, like the fifth row with a whole bunch of, U.S. family. And so looking diagonally through the goal, I had a very clear dead-on shot of Landon Donovan in like the 80th, 85th minute, bearing down on goal from the right with no one to beat but the keeper. And this, named best young player at the 2002 World Cup, had not yet had a signature moment in this World Cup. And would he at this moment take this game by the scruff of its neck and deliver us a jolt of hope? No. And I saw it in his eyes. Like I could see him suddenly overwhelmed by like, oh gosh, I don't quite know what to do here. I mean, I'm projecting, obviously. That's what I would have thought in that situation. It was not the, I came here to take names and kick ass and I no longer take names. It was befuddlement and confusion, and I can't remember who he sloughed off to, but then, everyone around us was like, ah! Like you could feel it then. You could feel that Landon had not taken the braver, more aggressive, more leaderly choice, and it really made us quake a little bit for the future, on top of the fact that we were bottom of the fucking World Cup heap.
I love this story. I like to believe, to add a slight flourish, in that moment you stood up and just the whole stadium went quiet. Everybody froze apart from you and Landon, and you said, "Fear not, little one, your time will come." And then just the stadium snapped back immediately into life. Whether that's true or not, we will find out what becomes of that interaction. And in the aftermath of this one, 3 weeks after the World Cup, Bruce Arena's contract expired. It was over for Bruce. In a way, he's never really recovered from this moment. He's almost numb to those trophies. A true sense of what might have been for that man. Maybe if he was born 20 years later, he would have gone to Germany, been someone's assistant, and could have truly grown and be running a Premier League team. I wonder what he feels in his heart. But the big headline was, despite a brutal reality check, which we have just relived together, Brenda, despite the early exit, television ratings continued to soar as the competition progressed. There was really a sign. In the United States, you were there, going to the games, making those relationships, savouring those memories forged in the stadium. But it was inevitable. This was the moment when I realised its growth was inarguable. The audiences were up 100% on ABC versus the 2002 World Cup. ESPN ultimately paid up $100 million to air the next two World Cups, which may not sound a lot from a SEC perspective or whatever, but my God, this was jarring compared to the previous World Cups, where I think an agency, Soccer United Marketing, paid FIFA for the rights and had to staff the broadcast and sell all the advertising themselves. To me, the big headline of this journey we've just walked together, this was the World Cup where football flipped to becoming at least economically viable in the United States, Brendan.
Yeah, and yet another then missed opportunity for the game in the country in a way, because, as opposed to previous years where it's like, or the previous World Cup where like we had the team but didn't quite have the foundation, to really propel it. This time the foundation was starting to be there, but the team was not there yet to exploit it. And also, by the way, the people who are really mad about the kits right now, which I'm not saying you shouldn't be, this is a great example, these last two World Cups, 02 and 06, of like, the kits have no relationship to the quality of the performance, y'all. None whatsoever. The 2002 kits, garbage. Absolute garbage. Horrible. Cookie cutter. And yet, look how great we did. 2006, still today, two of the best kits we've ever had. And they are currently, at the bottom of a toilet called time. So don't overreact to the kits anymore. It only makes you crazy. Let's just see what happens when the games are played.
Everything is retroactively. Nostalgia is infused by performance. And the last word on this World Cup, I want to deliver an apology because I do believe this was the moment when football flipped in the United States on the men's side in a seismic way. And retrospectively, I believe we all owe a debt to the work of one Mr. Dave O'Brien. Subscribe here for more Men in Blazers videos and courage.